What would you do if you were alone in your grandmother's old farmhouse and you kept hearing strange noises outside in the middle of the night? That's exactly the situation I found myself in one chilly autumn evening. I had come to stay with my grandmother for a few days while my parents were out of town on a business trip. I loved staying at our place. It was a cozy old farmhouse nestled in the countryside, surrounded by fields and forests. As a kid, I had so many fond memories of playing in the backyard, exploring the woods, and sitting by the fireplace listening to my grandmother tell stories. But this particular visit was starting to feel more like a nightmare. It had started off normal enough. I arrived in the late afternoon. My grandmother greeted me warmly, and we spent the evening chatting and catching up over a delicious home-cooked meal. As the sun began to set, my grandmother said she was going to head to bed early. I am an old woman, can't stay up as late as I used to, she chuckled. I assured her I would be fine on my own for the night, and I kissed her goodnight. I decided to stay up for a little while and watch some TV in the living room. The old farmhouse could get a bit creepy at night, so I made sure to keep all the lights on. Around 11 p.m., I started feeling sleepy, so I got up to head to the guest bedroom. That's when I heard it, a faint rustling sound coming from outside. I froze, straining my ears to listen. After a few moments, there it was again, the sound of something moving around in the darkness outside. My heart started racing. Was it an animal? A burglar? My mind started conjuring up all sorts of terrifying scenarios. I tiptoed over the window and peered out, but I couldn't see anything in the pitch-black night. I debated whether I should wake my grandmother, but I didn't want to alarm her unnecessarily. Instead, I decided to investigate further. Carefully, I made my way to the front door and slowly unlocked it, peering out into the blackness. Still, I couldn't see a thing. I stepped outside, shivering a bit in the cool autumn air, and began walking around the perimeter of the house, straining my eyes to detect any movement. Suddenly, off to my left, I heard a loud snap, like a twig breaking underfoot. I whirled around, my heart pounding, but saw nothing. "Hello?" I called out tentatively. "Is someone there?" No response. I hurried back inside and locked the door behind me, my hands trembling. I knew I shouldn't have gone out there. What if there was some kind of intruder lurking in the darkness? I quickly checked to make sure all the doors and windows were securely locked. Then made my way to the guest bedroom, my eyes darting around nervously. I barely slept that night, jumping at every creak and groan of the old house. I kept thinking I heard strange noises outside, but when I'd get up to look, there was nothing there. By morning, I was exhausted, my nerves frayed. Over breakfast, I mentioned the strange noises to my grandmother. To my surprise, she didn't seem overly concerned. "Oh, it's probably just some wild animals roaming around," she said dismissively. "This old place can get a bit spooky at night, but there's nothing to worry about, dear." I wasn't so sure. The rest of the day passed uneventfully, and as night fell again, I found myself more sitting alone in the living room, my eyes constantly darting to the windows. Around 11 p.m., I heard it again, that soft rustling sound from outside. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. Slowly, I got up and crept over the window, peeking out cautiously. At first, I saw nothing, but then, in the dim glow of the porch light, I noticed a shadowy figure moving stealthily across the yard, ducking behind the trees. My heart nearly stopped. I backed away from the window, my mind racing. Should I call the police? Wake my grandmother? I was too scared to move. Instead, I just stood there, trembling, listening intently for any other sounds. After what felt like an eternity, I heard the unmistakable creak of the front door handle turning. I let out a terrified gasp and scrambled to the kitchen, grabbing the largest knife I could find. Gripping it tightly, I slowly made my way back to the front door, my entire body shaking. I peered through the peephole, but I couldn't see anything. The door handle stopped turning, and everything went silent. I held my breath, straining to hear any other sounds. Suddenly, a loud thud came from the side of the house, making me jump. I waited, my heart pounding, for what felt like hours. But nothing else happened. Eventually, I mustered up the courage to slowly open the front door and peek outside. The yard was completely still and quiet, with no sign of the shadowy figure I had seen earlier. Feeling a bit foolish, I locked the door and returned to the guest bedroom, my adrenaline finally starting to subside. I tried to tell myself that I was just being paranoid, that it was probably just a curious raccoon or a possum, but a nagging sense of unease lingered. The next day, I decided to take a walk around the property, hoping to put my mind at ease. As I strolled through the fields, I noticed something odd. There were several sets of large, unfamiliar footprints in the soft earth, leading from the tree line towards the house. My stomach dropped. When I got back, I told my grandmother what I had seen. To my surprise, she just sighed heavily. I was hoping this wouldn't happen again, she murmured, her brow furrowed with worry. She motioned for me to sit down and then launched into a chilling tale. Apparently, several years ago, a strange man had started showing up at the farmhouse at night, peering in the windows and trying to get inside. My grandmother had called the police, but by the time they arrived, the man had vanished into the darkness. I felt a chill run down my spine. "What did you do?" I asked, dreading the answer. "Well, I stopped going to the police after a while," she admitted, her eyes downcast. "They never did anything, and I was starting to worry that the man would retaliate if I kept reporting him. So I just tried to ignore it, hoped he would eventually get bored and go away." That night, I barely slept at all. Every creak and groan of the old house had me on high alert. Around 3 a.m., I heard it again, the unmistakable sound of something moving around out there. I crept to the window and peered out, my heart pounding. There in the darkness, I saw the silhouette of a man slowly making his way towards the house. I watched, frozen with fear, as he approached the front door and began jiggling the handle, trying to get in.